Rain slammed against the sidewalk as the old man collapsed beside the restaurant window. The people passing by barely looked at him. A couple stepped around his body without stopping. A teenager pulled out his phone, recorded for 2 seconds, then kept walking. A delivery driver muttered something under his breath and crossed the street. The man tried to push himself up. Failed. His hands trembled violently against the wet concrete. Then the restaurant door opened. Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. A woman stepped out carrying a trash bag in one hand and froze the second she saw his face. The bag slipped from her fingers. Her lips parted. No way. The old man slowly lifted his head. His beard was uneven. His coat was soaked through. His eyes looked hollow from weeks of exhaustion. But she knew those eyes instantly. 10 years could not erase what he had done for her. Mr. Caldwell? The man blinked slowly. He stared at her like he was trying to place a memory buried under years of pain. The woman's breathing shook. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. Because 10 years ago, this billionaire had saved her son's life. And now he was homeless outside her restaurant. Before I tell you what happened next, take 1 second to like this video and subscribe. Because this story is going to leave you thinking long after it ends. Marisol Vega rushed toward him and dropped to her knees on the wet pavement. Oh my God. Ethan. Ethan Caldwell looked at her weakly. I'm sorry, he whispered. Do I know you? That sentence shattered her heart. Because she had spent 10 years praying she would someday thank the man who changed her life. And he did not even remember her name. Marisol grabbed his freezing hands. You helped my son, she said softly. 10 years ago, at Rosario's diner. Ethan frowned slightly. Rain dripped from his gray hair onto his face. Then something flickered behind his tired eyes. A memory. A small diner. A little boy asleep in a booth. Hospital bills on a counter. Marisol saw recognition slowly appear on his face. You're, Ethan whispered. Yes, she said, crying now. You saved him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Traffic roared past. Rain hammered the pavement. And the billionaire who once owned skyscrapers sat shaking on the sidewalk, while the waitress he once helped held his hands like family. Marisol helped him stand. He could barely keep his balance. You're freezing, she said. Come inside. No, I'm okay. You are not okay. The firmness in her voice surprised him. Not pity. Not charity. Concern. Real concern. Something he had not felt in a very long time. She wrapped his arm around her shoulders and guided him toward the restaurant. The warmth hit Ethan immediately. The smell of garlic, rice, roasted chicken, and fresh bread filled the air. The restaurant was small but beautiful. Family photos lined the walls. Customers laughed softly over late dinners. A piano version of an old Spanish song played through hidden speakers. It felt alive. Ethan stood there silently while water dripped from his coat onto the floor. Marisol turned toward the kitchen. Leo, she shouted. A tall young man appeared from the back carrying plates. He stopped instantly when he saw Ethan. Confusion crossed his face. Then shock. Then disbelief. Mom, he whispered. Marisol nodded emotionally. Leo slowly set the plates down. That's him. Marisol could barely speak. That's him. Leo stared at Ethan like he was looking at a ghost. Because 10 years ago, doctors told him he might not survive another 6 months without surgery. And this man standing in front of him had changed that. Leo walked forward slowly. You paid for my surgery, he said quietly. Ethan lowered his eyes. I remember now. Leo swallowed hard. You saved my life. The restaurant suddenly felt silent. Even the customers noticed the emotion in the room. Marisol pulled out a chair. Sit. Ethan obeyed quietly. Leo disappeared into the kitchen. Minutes later, he returned with soup, bread, tea, and roasted chicken. Ethan stared at the food. The steam rose gently into the air. He looked embarrassed. I can't pay for this. Marisol almost laughed through her tears. You already did, she whispered. Ethan's eyes lowered. And for the first time in months, someone made him feel human again. 10 years earlier, Ethan Caldwell had everything. Power, respect, money. His company, Caldwell Urban Development, controlled luxury towers, hotels, and commercial buildings across 3 states. Business magazines called him a genius. News anchors called him visionary. Investors waited months just to get meetings with him. But success came with a cost. Ethan spent more time inside boardrooms than inside his own home. His wife Vanessa stopped asking when he would be home years ago. His son Adrian grew up around wealth, but far away from his father. Every conversation in the Caldwell mansion sounded polished instead of real. Even dinner felt scheduled. One rainy night, Ethan left a charity event in Manhattan and told his driver to stop at a diner outside the city. Rosario's Diner. Small place. Old booths. Flickering lights. Nothing fancy. But Ethan was exhausted and hungry. When he walked inside, he noticed Marisol immediately. She was trying to smile while serving customers, but her eyes looked swollen from crying. Ethan noticed things most rich people ignored. The unpaid bills partially hidden beneath the register. The little boy sleeping in the booth. The way Marisol secretly checked her phone every few minutes with fear in her eyes. He ordered coffee and a sandwich. Marisol apologized 3 times for the wait, even though the diner was full. Ethan watched her carefully. Something was wrong. When she walked away, the diner owner leaned close. "Her son's sick," he whispered quietly. "Heart condition." Ethan looked toward the sleeping child. "How bad?" The owner sighed heavily. "She's trying to raise money for surgery. Insurance won't cover enough." Ethan looked back at Marisol. She was smiling at customers while silently falling apart. And suddenly, all the success in Ethan's life felt strangely empty. Before leaving, he quietly asked for the bill. Then he added something extra. A folded check. And a handwritten note. The next morning, Marisol received the call that changed everything. The surgery was fully paid for. Every cent. She thought the hospital made a mistake. Then the receptionist handed her the envelope. Inside was the note. A child should never lose his future because of money. No signature. But she knew exactly who wrote it. She cried so hard she could barely stand. That surgery saved Leo's life. And Marisol never forgot it. Not for one day. Back in the present, Ethan finished the soup slowly. His hand still shook slightly. Leo sat across from him silently. Finally, Marisol spoke. "What happened to you?" Ethan stared into the tea. The question sat heavily between them. Because 6 months ago, he had been worth nearly $3 billion. Now he owned 2 shirts and slept in shelters. Ethan let out a tired breath. "My business partner stole everything." Leo frowned immediately. "What do you mean stole?" Ethan rubbed his face slowly. "Richard Voss was my CFO for 12 years. The name itself sounded bitter. I trusted him." That sentence carried more pain than anger. He created fake companies, moved money through fake developments, forged approvals under my name. Marisol listened quietly. Ethan continued. "By the time investigators came, everything pointed at me. Didn't you fight it?" "I tried." His laugh sounded empty. "But banks don't care about explanations. Investors don't care about loyalty. And the media," he shook his head. "The media already decided who I was." Leo leaned forward carefully. "What about your family?" Ethan went silent. That silence answered the question before he spoke. "My wife filed for divorce 11 days later." Marisol closed her eyes painfully. "My son sided with her." The words nearly broke coming out. Leo looked down. Ethan stared at the table. "You spend your whole life believing you built something strong. Then one bad season comes, and suddenly everyone shows you who they really are." Marisol reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his. "You still help people," she said softly. Ethan shook his head. "I thought money made me important." "No," Marisol whispered. "Your heart did." That nearly destroyed him. Because after months of public humiliation, after betrayal, after losing everything, those were the first kind words anyone had spoken to him in a very long time. If you're still watching, comment kindness below. Because what happens next is where this story changes forever. The next morning, Ethan woke up inside a small room above the restaurant. Marisol had insisted he stay. At first he refused. 3 times. But exhaustion eventually defeated pride. The room was tiny. Simple bed. Small lamp. One window facing the street. Yet Ethan slept better there than he had in months. Because for the first time since losing everything, he felt safe. Downstairs, the restaurant was already alive. Customers filled tables. Pans sizzled loudly. Marisol moved quickly between orders. Leo worked the register while reviewing law school applications on his laptop. Ethan stood quietly near the kitchen entrance. Watching. Marisol noticed him immediately. "You hungry? I should probably leave." "No," she said firmly. "You should eat." 20 minutes later, Ethan found himself peeling potatoes beside Leo in the kitchen. At first it felt ridiculous. This man once negotiated billion-dollar contracts. Now he sat peeling potatoes in a neighborhood restaurant. But strangely, it felt peaceful. No cameras. No meetings. No pretending. Just work. Real work. Leo glanced at him carefully. You know, he said quietly, Mom never stopped talking about you. Ethan looked surprised. She didn't. Leo shook his head. She kept your note in her purse for 10 years. Ethan stared silently at the cutting board. I didn't think anybody remembered. Leo gave a small smile. People remember kindness longer than money. That sentence stayed with Ethan all day, because he was starting to realize something painful. The people he lost when he lost money were never truly his people, and the woman helping him now owed him nothing. Yet she showed up anyway. That night, after closing, Leo approached Ethan holding a folder. What's that? Ethan asked. News articles about your company. Ethan's face hardened immediately. I don't really want to read those. You should. Leo opened the folder. I've been studying the case. Ethan looked uncomfortable immediately. Leo, I'm serious. Leo interrupted gently. Something about this doesn't make sense. He pulled out printed financial reports covered in handwritten notes. I've been comparing the investigation records with the public filings from your company. Ethan stared at him carefully. And Leo leaned forward. The timeline is wrong. Ethan frowned slightly. What do you mean? I mean, Leo said slowly. The money started disappearing almost 2 years before investigators claimed the fraud began. That got Ethan's full attention. Leo spread the papers across the table. These shell companies Richard created, somebody changed the dates during the audit. Ethan's expression tightened. That's impossible. No, Leo said quietly. It's deliberate. Marisol stood silently nearby listening. Leo pointed toward a transfer statement. Look at this. Your electronic approval signature appears here, while records show you were in Singapore during a conference. Ethan blinked. I was. Exactly. Leo's eyes narrowed. Somebody used your identity long before the company collapsed. A heavy silence filled the kitchen. For the first time in months, Ethan felt something dangerous returning. Hope. Leo sat back slowly. Mr. Caldwell, I think you were framed. The room went completely quiet. Ethan stared at the paperwork without moving. Then he whispered something almost too softly to hear. I knew I wasn't crazy. That sentence carried years of exhaustion inside it. Because after months of being called a fraud, a criminal, a liar, he had started questioning his own memory, his own judgment, his own reality. Marisol walked closer. You need to show this to someone. Ethan laughed bitterly. Nobody wants to reopen a billionaire fraud case. Leo shook his head immediately. No, but someone will reopen a federal conspiracy. Ethan looked up slowly. Leo continued. Richard didn't just steal money. He created a scapegoat. That changes everything. For the next week, the restaurant became something else after closing time. Not just a restaurant. A war room. Every night, Ethan and Leo spread documents across tables after customers left. Bank records, transaction histories, digital signatures, tax filings. The deeper Leo dug, the uglier the truth became. Richard Voss had been stealing from Ethan for years. Not recklessly, carefully, patiently, like a parasite feeding slowly enough not to kill the host too early. Leo discovered fake construction companies tied to offshore accounts, luxury properties hidden under false names, encrypted transfers routed through international banks, and worst of all, evidence that investigators had ignored certain discrepancies because the public wanted a villain quickly. Ethan sat silently one night, staring at the papers. All those years, he murmured. Marisol looked at him carefully. What? He sat beside me at my dinner table. His voice cracked slightly. Our family's vacation together. The pain in his eyes wasn't about money anymore. It was betrayal. The kind that changes the way you see people forever. Leo closed another folder. He studied you, he said quietly. What? Richard. He studied your habits. Your trust. Your routines. Leo pointed at the forged signatures. He knew exactly which documents you wouldn't question. Ethan leaned back slowly. Because I trusted him. Marisol looked directly at him. That's not weakness. Ethan looked at her. That trust built your company. He's the one who turned it into a weapon. For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then his eyes slowly lowered. Because deep down, part of him had blamed himself for everything. And hearing someone separate his kindness from Richard's evil felt strangely emotional. 3 days later, Leo contacted a federal financial crimes investigator. At first, the woman refused the meeting. Then Leo emailed the evidence. She called back 40 minutes later. The meeting happened the next morning. Ethan wore the only suit he still owned. It no longer fit properly. But Marisol ironed it herself before he left. "You look strong again," she told him softly. Ethan looked at his reflection quietly. For months he had looked broken. Now, for the first time, he looked alive. The investigator, Diane Mercer, spent 2 hours reviewing Leo's findings. By the end, her entire expression changed. "This," she said slowly, "is big." Ethan remained calm. "How big?" Diane closed the folder carefully. "Big enough to destroy careers." Within 48 hours, federal agents reopened the case. Subpoenas were issued. Bank accounts were frozen. Former employees were questioned again. And suddenly, the media narrative began changing. News anchors who once called Ethan Caldwell a disgrace now used different words. Possible setup. Financial manipulation. New evidence emerges. Richard Voss disappeared for 2 days. Then federal agents found him boarding a private jet in Miami. The arrest footage exploded online within hours. The mighty CFO walked through the airport in handcuffs while cameras flashed aggressively around him. Ethan watched the footage silently from the restaurant office. Marisol stood beside him. Neither spoke. Then Richard looked up directly into a camera. And for the first time in his life, he looked afraid. The investigation moved fast after that. Very fast. Once authorities pressured Richard's associates, people started talking. Accountants confessed. Lawyers handed over documents. Former executives cut deals to save themselves. And every confession pointed to one horrifying truth. Ethan Caldwell had been deliberately destroyed. Meanwhile, Vanessa Caldwell panicked. Because investigators discovered something else. She had quietly transferred millions into protected accounts months before the company collapsed. Accounts connected to Richard. The news spread instantly. The same social circles that once worshipped her suddenly disappeared. Charity boards removed her name. Friends stopped answering calls. Her law firm forced her resignation. One evening, she sat alone inside her luxury penthouse, scrolling through headlines about herself. And for the first time, she understood what loneliness actually felt like. Not long after, Adrian Caldwell appeared at the restaurant. He stood outside for nearly 10 minutes before entering. Nervous, ashamed. The dinner crowd filled the room with noise and laughter. Then Adrian spotted his father behind the counter helping serve food. He froze. Because Ethan looked different now. Lighter. Not richer. Not more powerful. Just real. Ethan looked up. Father and son locked eyes across the room. Adrian swallowed hard. "Dad." Ethan waited calmly. Adrian looked devastated. "I didn't know." Ethan nodded once. "I know." That almost made Adrian cry harder. Because his father wasn't yelling. Wasn't attacking him. Wasn't punishing him. And somehow, that hurt more. "I should have stayed," Adrian whispered. Ethan stared at him quietly for several seconds. Then he grabbed another apron from beneath the counter and handed it over. "Then stay now." Adrian looked shocked. "You mean that?" Ethan simply pointed toward the kitchen. "Dishes are piling up." Marisol smiled softly from across the room. And just like that, healing began. Not through speeches. Not through dramatic apologies. Through work. Side by side. Night after night, Adrian started returning. Washing dishes. Cleaning tables. Helping close the restaurant. At first, customers didn't recognize him. Then social media did. Videos spread online rapidly. The billionaire's son now works in a small family restaurant. But the comments shocked people. Instead of mocking him, people respected it. Because for once, someone rich wasn't running from consequences. He was showing up. Weeks later, the federal ruling became official. Ethan Caldwell was cleared of all criminal liability. Richard Voss received multiple fraud convictions. Authorities recovered nearly $400 million in stolen assets. A large portion legally returned to Ethan. The media called it one of the biggest financial betrayals in modern corporate history. Reporters waited outside the restaurant hoping for interviews. Ethan refused every single one. Because something inside him had changed. 6 months earlier, he would have chased cameras. Now he protected peace. One evening, Leo found Ethan alone after closing. "You really don't miss it?" he asked. "The money. The power." Ethan smiled faintly. "I miss who I thought I was." Leo sat beside him quietly. Ethan looked around the restaurant. Customers had signed photos for the wall. Families celebrated birthdays there. Employees laughed in the kitchen. Marisol danced while cooking when she thought nobody noticed. It felt warm. Alive. Ethan exhaled slowly. "But I think losing everything showed me who I actually am." Leo smiled softly. That same month, Ethan made a decision that shocked everyone again. Instead of rebuilding another billion-dollar corporation, he invested in people, small businesses, scholarships, community kitchens, affordable housing for working families, not luxury towers, not private clubs, real communities. And at the center of it all stood one restaurant, the place where a waitress remembered kindness after 10 years. On opening day of their new community center, cameras filled the streets. But Ethan ignored them. Instead, he stood quietly beside Marisol looking at the building sign. Vega Caldwell Community Foundation. Her name came first. Marisol noticed immediately. You didn't have to do that. Ethan smiled softly. Yes, I did. Her eyes watered instantly. Because 10 years ago, he gave her son a future. And when the world abandoned him, she simply returned the kindness. That night, after everyone left, Ethan remained alone inside the empty restaurant. The lights were low. The chairs sat upside down on tables. The city hummed quietly outside. Marisol walked over holding something carefully folded. The note, she whispered. Ethan stared at it. The same paper, slightly faded now, edges worn from years of being carried everywhere. Marisol sat beside him. I kept it all this time. Ethan unfolded it slowly. A child should never lose his future because of money. His own handwriting stared back at him. For a long moment he said nothing. Then Marisol asked softly, why did you help us that night? Ethan looked down at the note, then toward the kitchen where Leo laughed with Adrian in the distance. And finally, he smiled. Small, tired, real. Because once, he whispered, someone helped me when nobody had to. Marisol's eyes filled with tears again. Outside, rain began falling softly against the windows, just like the night they first met. Only this time, neither of them was alone. And maybe that's the real lesson. Money can build towers, but kindness builds the people who survive after the towers fall. The people who truly love you are not the ones sitting beside you when life is easy. They are the ones who pull you off the sidewalk when life collapses. They are the ones who remember your heart after the world forgets your name. If this story touched you, comment kindness returns below. And if someone once showed up for you during your darkest moment, send this video to them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful stories like this.